Hi, everyone, and welcome to State of Node. Excited to have y'all here. Been seeing a bunch of comments in the YouTube chat already, so definitely make sure to say hi. Tell us where y'all are from. Hi, Fada. Hi, Louise. Comments in the whoops. Yeah, just wanted to get started. So let me go ahead and share my slides really quickly. This is the State of Node. Hosted by this dot, and we have some really amazing folks joining us today talking about all the amazing fun things happening in Node. Special shout out to this dot, my company, who is sponsoring my team put this together. Very excited about that. We get to work with some really amazing people. So if you're looking for a new position, we're always hiring. As you can see, Mario also is on our team. So if you want to work with Mario, and who's this, Deadpool? Spider-Man, somebody. But we also do a lot of really amazing events within the JavaScript ecosystem. So tomorrow is actually Vue Contributor Day, hosted by Evan Yu, creator of Vue.js. And if you just want to come and hear all the really exciting things happening with Vue, definitely join in. We also have React Mentoring. This is a free mentoring session for anybody at all levels who is interested in React. So come hang out there. We also do Women in Tech Monthly Mentoring. This is a really amazing event where just a bunch of amazing women come together and just have open conversation in a private setting. And then following with our State of Events, we have State of Web Components happening on June 21st. So definitely come hang out. Today we have some amazing panelists for State of Node. Beth, who is a senior software engineer at Red Hat, Danielle, who is at AWS, Colin, who is at Deno, and also Michael, who is at Red Hat. And IBM? Is that a typo, Michael?
No, the lead for Red Hat and IBM.
Oh, got it.
I work on our team is at Red Hat.
Perfect. So let me go ahead and just get started with the questions. And, again, folks, if you have any questions, feel free to post them in the chat and we'll try to get to them as quickly as possible. Maybe we can just really quickly do a quick introduction and maybe what is your involvement with Node? And Beth, you were nodding your head. So maybe you want to go first?
Sure, yeah. So as Tracy introduced, my name is Beth Griggs. I work at Red Hat. I spend quite a large portion of my time being involved in the Node project, most active in the release working group, so helping out with all of the releases, but also on the technical steering committee.
Thank you. Michael?
Yeah, Michael Dawson. I also work at Red Hat, very active in the project, involved in a bunch of the working groups, like the build working group, the Node API working group, and a bunch of the other ones, along with being on the technical steering committee and sort of long-time contributor and active across the project.
Danielle?
Hello, I'm Danielle Adams. I work at AWS on the Amplify platform, which is a platform for front-end and mobile developers. And then I also work on Node.js, mostly on releases. I've kind of been getting involved in some of the security stuff lately in the past couple months, and then on the technical steering committee as well.
Nice, awesome. And last but not least, definitely Colin.
Yes, I'm Colin Yerg. I have been contributing to Node since I think like 2014 now. So it's been a while, and recently started working at Deno, which is kind of an alternative runtime to Node. So yeah, that's me.
Schooling me on I was like, I got this right. Deno. It's called Deno. No, Colin, you schooled me wrong.
I have heard it said both ways, but I think technically it's Deno.
I start with a lot of these new libraries like Vite. It's called Vite, and they have it like on their front page. So I feel like all the libraries need to start doing that. Well, cool. Beth, did you want to just give us a quick introduction for Node 18 and kind of everyone else can kind of give general state of Node if they have any comments as well.
Yeah, sure. So I think, that's perhaps one of the biggest highlights of the year so far. Node.js 18 was released just over a month ago in April. It was probably one of the more featureful major releases we've had in some time. And some of the key features of the V8 JavaScript engine update, which tends to appear in all of the major upgrades. We've actually added quite a few browser APIs, experimental forms, so they're not stable yet. In particular, Fetch, which got a lot of excitement in the community, and some of the web streams experimental APIs too. And another highlight of that release was probably the test runner, and I think we'll probably use some of the time we have here today to dig into some of those features.
Any other comments? Michael, I see your.
Yeah, well, I'd agree with Beth that it was a good release, and we got actually lots of comments. Some good, some bad, but I think it was driven by, there was a lot of interesting things in the release, and I think that's good, and that it shows that new things are coming in. We're working on some nice experimental stuff, and it's sort of a good time to see that stuff coming in.
So for those of you who don't know, Node also has a lot of working groups. Node is probably one of the most organized projects I've ever experienced, and also the most strategic. So tons of amazing working groups that you can get involved in. If you've been looking to figure out how you can contribute to Node, the recommendation is always joining a working group. There's a lot of stuff happening. I know Danielle and Beth, you all are, focused on release working group. So do you have any updates on those or comments?
Do you want to go, Beth?
Yeah, so I think
the show. So
yeah, sure. I think one of the highlights in the release working group this year is I think we're on track to onboard 4 new folks into the group. So it's really great to bring new people on. People like Danielle, myself, Richard, and others in the group have been mentoring and pairing with those folks to bring them on board.
Yeah, I think it's an not strictly build related, but Danielle mentioned the security triage work she's doing, and there's been a few places where we've managed to spin up a group of people who are sharing some of that very important work, like the release work that just needs to happen sort of day in, day out. And I think the fact that the release team has been able to bring on a bunch of new people is really a good thing, and it's important for the sort of future sustainability of things going forward.
I think that one of the special things about Node is that there actually is there's a very good happy path to getting involved in the working groups. And I think that, previous people and existing people have done such a great job being examples as mentoring people into these groups. I've heard so many stories about those things. So, what's the path to kind of get that mentorship and or get involved? I feel like everyone's always jumping, trying to get involved in Node, but it's just so big, so vast, right? It's hard to figure out.
Yeah, if you just look at the GitHub repo, it can be a little bit intimidating with lots going on, lots of people commenting on PRs. The working groups, like the Node API working group, it's a way to get to know some individuals who are all working on sort of a smaller area of the project. And I find that actually, we've had a good number of people join there, get involved. And it's that sort of personal connection that I think makes it a lot easier in terms of now you've got somebody to ask questions to. I get emails from some of the other members saying, hey, what do you think about this? And you can have that conversation. We actually also, the meetings are a great place. We have a meeting every Friday, and that's just a place where if you have questions or you're uncertain, you can get together and share and discuss. And I think that's why that works really well in some cases. And I suspect that's, you get, and Danielle, you get some of that in the release working group too, where you can get together and actually talk to people versus, GitHub's nice async communication, but sometimes there's nothing like actually talking to people.
Yeah, if you go on the Node website, you can also see a calendar with all of the scheduled working group meetings. So that's something that I do. I just like export the whole calendar into my personal calendar. And of course, I don't attend everything. I don't even attend a lot of them, but the things that I kind of want to pop in, it's good to have them on the calendar. And I think like the working groups are a really easy way to get involved. That's certainly how I involved. I just kind of popped in one day and never left. So it's just like a really easy entry point. Because yeah, I think like GitHub can be a little bit overwhelming. You don't really know where to start. And yeah, I think like Michael said, that kind of face-to-face time is really helpful.
Danielle, is there anything exciting that you're doing with like the security working group right now?
I wouldn't say exciting. It's definitely like, it's nice to see things moving. And I think one of the things that we'll probably talk about at some point is like the funding that we're getting for people to actually work on these issues that come in. Like we have to run on, for instance, a lot of operating systems. I don't know Windows that well. So having people that are experts in maybe these platforms and whatnot that are actually funded to work on the project is really exciting because, like these security issues, as I'm sure we all know, are super important to stay on top of.
Yeah. Well, I mean, is there any more you can elaborate on the funding?
Yeah, I think Michael could probably talk about the specifics, but from like a surface level, we were able to get funding from, I think it was called OpenSSF. And so we were able to actually use that money so like OpenSSF is funding open source projects to work on specific security initiatives. And so we were able to actually bring someone on full time to work specifically on security for Node.js and to tackle like some of these issues that, we might get from like bug bounties and GitHub and whatnot.
Yeah, the OSSF is like the Open Source Security Foundation, fairly new foundation. And, they looked at projects out there, and Node ranked as pretty much one of the top on the criticality level. And we'd had some interactions with some of the people who are sort of funding that foundation. And so, yeah, we managed to line up, the resource who's going to help with help with a number of different things. But one, the triage that Danielle mentioned, we've got a rotation, and we should really be thankful for the people who volunteered to be part of that rotation. But on that 2-week rotation, the idea is not that you've dedicated your full 2 weeks, but to spend some of your time in the week to sort of say thanks for your vulnerability report, and we're looking at it and do some initial investigation. But if it's something that's going to take a lot of time, that's where this resource can help jump in and spend the whole week if it's something that's important to and requires that level of deep investigation, as well as then work on the fix. Because the thing with security, sometimes it becomes very much time critical. You can't say, well, when you have time, please we'll work on it. So having somebody who's got the time dedicated is really helpful there. They also, the goal is also from that funding is to help Node document some of the processes, look at our supply chain, and hopefully provide a pattern that other projects can follow as well. I think we have a lot of really good approaches, and like we've got a well-documented security process, and some other things that we just do already. But if we can document those and share those, the OSSF's goal is not just to help by providing some people, but also to turn that into something that's reusable by other projects as well.
Awesome. And Michael, Next 10.
Yeah,
that's the hottest working groups out there.
I think it's interesting in that, like the Node project is one of the most open sort of projects out there. So there isn't like one company or one small number of people who are like charting the future and the direction. It's a large group of collaborators, all with their own thoughts and ideas. And so like part of the challenge is like, how do you pull all that and harness it into what's the direction that we think is going to be the most important for us going forward in the next 10 years? That's what the Next 10 effort is intended to do. we went through, trying to understand our sort of, project values, our technical values. And now we're at the point where we're doing deep dives into particular areas, and we've already done some into things like, WASM and documentation and HTTP. And it's been good to sort of get together and agree on what we think is strategic going forward. And for example, the one on HTTP, modern HTTP, kind of, I think, was the precursor to get people excited. And that's, very quickly after that, Fetch came into Node as one of the, we said, well, we need multiple levels of APIs, and Fetch was like clearly like one of the ones that we wanted to provide. So that has been really interesting to get together with people who have an interest in those specific areas, sort of dive as deep as we can and sort of say, okay, it's not like we're at a company where we can say, you go off and work on these, but like, this is what we think is strategic. And, hopefully give people confidence that if they work on those areas, that it's something that the project is interested in. And, our next sort of set of deep dives are scheduled for the Collaborator Summit at OpenJS World, which is starting June 6th. And so, if you're interested in, let me see if I can remember which ones are coming up. Hold on. Observability and ESM is the ones we're going to talk about at the Collab Summit itself. So if you're interested, we hope to see you there. And then otherwise, we've used these to drive some documentation in the collaborator documentation and so forth. So I think I always find those discussions interesting because it's a way to learn about a particular topic where, we've typically been able to pull in some of the people who have the real deep knowledge to have that broader discussion.
Yeah, it may be worth just adding there that in those discussions and deep dives, they're not restricted to like existing participants of the Node project or the Node community. We have kind of reached out to other stakeholders from outside of the project to bring those into the discussion.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Like, so for example, TypeScript, we had, some people from the Definitely Type project involved. In the one we did on single binary executables, we had some people who, worked on some of the options that are already out there. So yeah, that's a very important point that like we're looking to get that broader input when we're doing those.
Nice. So everyone's always excited about new features. And, Michael, I know you mentioned a bunch of them that are kind of being discussed and worked on and hopefully released. Colin, we haven't heard much from you. Like, what are you excited about? Or what are some features you feel like maybe Node developers can be excited about for the future?
So just in the Node 18 release, I personally was working on the new test runner. So I guess I'm a little biased there, but that's what I'm most excited for. But yeah, I mean, having Fetch is a nice thing to have. People have wanted that for years. I personally think it's a little bit of an overrated API, but if people love it and want it, then, more power to them. And then just I think getting as much web platform compatibility as possible coming up would be another good thing to have, just because, it kind of is, I think what kind of differentiates JavaScript as a backend language. You can't really spin up a Go server and have, isomorphic or universal code. And also, just as far as keeping up with other runtimes like Dino and Cloudflare workers, I know they're both spending a lot of time on web platform compatibility. So it's another important thing for Node to focus on.
Yeah, I think that's one where if you look at the Next 10 work and where we did some of the technical, certainly in the technical values versus the specific technical points, like modern APIs was definitely one that's in there. I think it would be good to have a Next 10 deep dive on, like, the web API compatibility and what specifically we think we want to do on that front in terms of, At least for me, I'm always, if we can write down a few bullet points, that helps to focus the mind and to make sure that we've got agreement and have a discussion. So I think that would actually be a great thing to do as a step on that front.
Nice. Danielle, what are you excited about? Any new features?
Lost my mouse. I don't think anything in particular. I think just like the added, I think that the fact that Node 18 was very feature heavy was it brought up a lot of excitement to the project, and that was really nice because I think that we have Node has like a very kind of like aggressive release cycle. So it might seem like, we're releasing all of these small things like very, very quickly. And so to have this big release with all of these big features, I think was really exciting for the project and for, for all of the developers out there as well. So there's a lot of people that, kind of went into making that successful.
Yeah, I think our model is kind of like it works against the traditional products where, traditionally products were like, oh, we're going to hold on to all of our features and we're going to make a big splash in the next release. The Node model is very much, let's get things out as quickly as we can. Let's get people experimenting with them. So like if we have a new feature, it's Semver minor. Oh, it quickly gets backported so you can use it in the LTS. And so we don't have the big bang, oh, we hoarded all of our things until the next release. Which then, people kind of look at it and say, well, why isn't there anything new? It's like, well, there's been lots new, but it's just already available. So it's not new in this release. But I think that's good. It's not bad. Like, I don't think we should be saying, let's prevent people from make people wait longer, right? Just to have some press. But it does kind of work against what people often look for in product releases.
I totally agree with Michael. I've given a number of conference talks kind of like on the state of Node over the years. And I've always said like the major releases should be boring. Like really the things that go into major releases are things that are breaking people. So hopefully we're not, breaking too many people. It's the Semver minor releases that you should be on the lookout for. They have all the new exciting, goodies that people want to play with.
Yeah, and one addition to that, as we've gone through the major releases over the past few years, the trend has been less and less breaking changes over time, which I see is a good thing for the stability of the platform.
Yeah, that's kind of the balance we have. Like, let's get as much innovation in as we can while making sure we don't break the sort of large established base that, a lot of people are perfectly happy with what's there and wants it to continue working and working well and maybe faster. But so making sure we can bring in new stuff that helps the people on sort of the leading edge continue to progress while making sure that that large base continues to be happy with what's there.
Well, I see a lot of people in the comments also talking about upgrades. And is there an upgrade guide? Feel free to post it in the private chat and I can post it in the public chat. Resources, tips and tricks.
I don't know. I know Beth and I have had this conversation. So I don't know, Beth, if you have any thoughts you want to share first, or.
Yeah, so we don't have a guide as such. And particularly if you were going from 16 to 18, you'd need to review all of the changes that landed in 16, 17, and 18. So the gap would be 2 major releases that you're upgrading. So my first tip would be to look at the major release changelog for Node 15.00 and for 17.00 and 18.00, because that should capture most of the breakages that you should see between going from 16 to 18. But yeah, generally, Git bisecting and upgrading Node versions can be helpful. So trying to find where the breakage that's stopping you from upgrading came in. And then you can then refer to the changelog and review that and see if you can understand what's happening. Sometimes that can be a challenge. Sometimes our changelog doesn't help in that regard. Like, it's not obvious why this particular commit is breaking your app. So I'd encourage folks to open an issue on Node.js help, or maybe even Node.js core, and at least on our side, maybe there's some documentation updates we can do to improve and to help you get upgraded.
As a project, we actually used to have this exact thing. I think it was Fishrock who used to maintain them. I think the problem is, we run on volunteer time, and it's not exactly the most glamorous thing to go through all the breaking changes and kind of document what has happened. But it would be great if we could get back to having those again.
Yeah, certainly if anybody has gone, like Emily just mentioned, they just went through, if we could somehow crowdsource that. And it makes me wonder, is there something we can do in the project to give people a better place to share their experiences? As Beth mentioned, the help repo is a great place to sort of ask your questions, but I wonder if maybe we should figure out somewhere to be like, here's a Slack channel or a repo where people could say, here's my experience upgrading and share that, because that might be quite useful.
Sounds amazing. Great opportunity. Thanks, Emily. If you want a project, you have one now.
Well, and I think,
sorry,
I was going to say, I think it was Patrick's comment there was also, it was like upgrading from 17, no problems yet. That's also kind of what we aim for. Like Beth said, there's less and less breaking changes. And really, when we say breaking changes, it's very rare that the project actually says, let's make something that we think will actually break a bunch of people, and therefore everybody would like an upgrade. Usually should just be replace it with the new version and hopefully everything works. The cases of what we've called breaking changes, we stick with Semver, and Semver majors are often like, well, this might have a chance of changing the behavior, we're not sure, or, yes, we know this actually changes the behavior, but the number of people affected should be quite small. So like, it's not that we expect when you go from one major to the next that you're going to have to do a whole bunch of work. But of course, I think 18, we found a few places where that was more the case than others. But again, you still needed to be using some very specific parts of the APIs. So I think that contributes it a bit as well. Like, it's not like we've got a list of like, hey, these 5 things we think are really going to have a major impact. I guess like 18, we called out that 17 and 18, we moved to OpenSSL 3 from 1.1.1. That is a case where we know, like, every time OpenSSL has new versions, it drops older algorithms. So if you're using other algorithms, we call things like that out. But in a lot of other cases, they're like, it's I shouldn't say a surprise, but it's not like we would have known in advance. But yeah, as you said, maybe a great opportunity. Like, if people go through and if we could figure out how to help them share their experiences and then capture the places where actually it took a little bit of work, that would be good. Because I know Beth has a talk at the upcoming OpenJS World where she works through one of those that she worked with one of our internal Red Hat product teams that ran into a case where it's like, oh, we didn't think this would cause anybody some real grief, but it did.
Awesome. That's great. I mean, definitely sounds like OpenJS World is the place to be. So if y'all want to go to Austin, it is in about 2 weeks. Buy your tickets now. But I'm sure there's going to be like a lot of really amazing videos and content that comes out of that too. So really, really excited about that. Do we want to go a little deeper into like the test runner?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, I guess I can talk about that a little bit. So for me, it was about adding a test runner to Node was about kind of scratching a personal itch. When I write like applications and modules, I'm very wary of pulling things in from NPM just because a lot of things can go wrong. One of the things that I've always had to pull in was a test runner. And I personally have always used Lab, which is the Happy.js ecosystems test runner. But it's not the most well-maintained. And then there are lots of other test runners out there that are more maintained, but there are various things about them that I just really don't like. And so I always kind of wanted one to be in Node, and I would tweet about my frustrations and things like that, but never kind of pulled the trigger on it. And then there was an issue actually open saying, should we add a test runner to Node? And I think that was kind of in reaction to like Dino having a test runner. And it sat there for months and months, and nobody really did anything about it. So I just decided to write one based on the discussion that happened in the issue. And so I would say out of all the existing test runners, it's probably most similar to Node Tap. It executes tests as quickly as it can. So instead of doing a full pass over all of your test files and seeing which files you want to run and whatnot, you give it a list of files and it just executes them. You can run it with or without a command line runner. So you can say just node my test file and it'll execute. And it outputs tap, so the test anything protocol format. And then you can actually use the tap to pipe into like other reporters and things like that if you want to transform the output to be a little more human readable or whatever your format of choice is. And that's kind of the background on it. Kind of an interesting side quest that happened with the test runner was I had originally implemented it as a core module that was called test_runner. And a number of people were like, it'd be really cool if we put this under the Node namespace. So if you're not familiar with that, it's kind of, you can require Node core modules with Node : and then the name of the module. So like Node : FS, for example. And then it kind of spiraled into this whole thing where people wanted it to only be importable under the Node prefix. So it's actually the first module that you cannot do require or import test. If you do that, it will try to load from your Node modules, and if there's something there, then it'll load it. So you actually have to do Node : test. And that was a very kind of controversial thing. I think there were actually 2 votes that the TSC had onto whether to do that and exactly what the semantics should be. But yeah, so that was a fun, like I said, side quest just for trying to show the test runner.
And I think that helps. I mean, that's an interesting thing to mention because it does help us figure out what we should be doing going forward in similar situations and stuff like that. And it does, unfortunately, sometimes slow things down a little bit, but it helps to sort of beat the beaten path there, which would be good. And I will add I like the fact that the new test runner uses tap. It looks very familiar, especially since that's what we've been having, or at least I don't know how obvious it is in the regular CIs, but it's what's been there and looks very familiar to me anyway.
Echo that. Like, it's great to have it built in. I remember seeing a lot of comments on Twitter and other spaces saying how when they have very small projects, all they have to go out and install is a linter and a test runner. So to have one of those built in and to save them that effort is great.
Amazing. And I know we've talked about fetch a lot, and fetch is the hotness, right, Colin?
We're trying to make fetch happen.
But people are really I guess I shouldn't say people are really excited. I've heard from you all that people are excited, but maybe we want to elaborate a little bit more about like built-in fetch, and I think we know what the reception is.
I think there's been quite a discussion. It was a long time requested, and I think even like I find within the developers within Red Hat who are more sort of maybe focused on the front end, but doing using Node as part of the tooling, or doing both the front end and the back end. They're very excited when they see APIs that they've seen in the browser and that they can now use on the back end. I think part of the discussion around fetch has been, oh, well, wait a sec, it's too close to the web APIs. And then there'll be people, well, it's not quite close enough. So, there's been lots of good discussion, and, there's a few things like there's a collision in the namespace. But I think that, I think personally us pulling things in and exposing them as experimental is a good way to go. Part of the conversations, we probably wouldn't have gotten a lot of the good feedback we're getting on fetch without having, actually added it in the release. So overall, I personally think it's been a positive thing so far.
There's a question here. Are there any stats about the Fetch API?
I don't have any numbers on that front, but what I do know is, the Fetch API that came in is based on Indici, and that's a project that's quite focused on performance. Now, in the discussions we did have in Next 10 on modern HTTP, there was really an agreement that we need two levels of APIs. One is sort of the high level, easiest to use, and Fetch kind of fit that use case. But then a second one that's needed is a lower level, more control. And that's the one where, like, if you really, really want to optimize your performance, you probably want to move down to the one that gives you, it's a little bit more work to use, but you have more control over what's going on and you can optimize to your particular environment. So I wouldn't necessarily want to say, you should compare pure raw performance of Fetch against other libraries that are maybe meant to be that sort of lower level, and the what may come later on in terms of a more, it's not feature complete, but like a sort of a more knobs and things that you can tweak from an Indici type level.
The last I heard, there were actually some performance issues, and I think it's due to the use of web streams, which are currently not very optimized inside of Node. I've actually had some conversations with people. Some people say web streams are just designed to be slow, but I've also heard some really good counterpoints that, like, web streams are designed in a way where, for example, if you don't have any JavaScript listeners doing anything with the stream, say you're piping it directly to like C++ or Rust, that you can do that, and you can do it a lot more efficiently than you can with Node streams. But I do think that one issue that we're currently facing regarding performance is related to how we have not optimized web streams yet.
So there's moving on to kind of like some other features. There was a question about async hooks. Is async hooks still experimental, and is there anything like new worth mentioning there?
It's definitely still experimental. The discussions we've had in the project is it may never become non-experimental. It provides some capabilities, but unfortunately, the way it's currently designed, it exposes more of sort of the underlying inner workings than people are comfortable, saying we can support that, going into the future. The focus has been on, can we provide APIs which provide a better abstraction? So a good example of that is the async, and I'm going to get that wrong, async context APIs, where they provide a way to have an async context across, if you did any programming in things like C or Java, you'll be familiar with thread local. That basically gives you the ability to stash some data on your thread and then pull it back out whenever you want it without having to pass it through all your function calls. And that's easy to do in those languages because they have a thread, and at the operating system level, we can put some storage in that thread. For Node and other async-based runtimes, we have a single thread that actually supports a whole bunch of concurrent async threads of executions, and so we can't stash something in the thread because that same place would be used by those other threads, async threads of execution as well. So the async local context gives you the equivalent, and behind the scenes, it uses async hooks, but it hides them. So it provides you the ability to say, okay, I'm going to stash some data that I can use for my async thread of execution. For example, an HTTP request, very important for things like open telemetry tracing, and any case where you want to sort of trace data and correlate data that goes across multiple different steps in a process, or even like you want to go out to the database, come back and continue to do some work. So long way of saying, like, our approach on async hooks is to try and provide higher level APIs that provide a better level of abstraction. And async local context was one of those. But there's work in the diagnostics working group to try and identify use cases that people use async hooks for and provide alternative APIs. Another API that's being worked on that front is diagnostic channel. So it's basically feeding data down a diagnostic channel instead of you having to hook before and after events and trying to capture that information.
Also, async local storage, new-ish, maybe worth discussing.
Yeah, so that's what I was just mentioning.
Okay.
Async local storage is that API, which is a higher level API. We were comfortable enough to make that stable. And it gives you it gives you one of the things that people used async hooks for. And now you no longer have to use async hooks to get that functionality. And diagnostic channel is another one we're trying to give that. And there's an effort to say, okay, tell us your use cases for async hooks, and let's see if we can provide better abstractions for all of those. And then effectively, there's nobody saying, hey, we're going to pull out async hooks, because they are used in some key places. But, the long-term goal would be to move people to these other APIs and maybe be able to get rid of it.
Got it. Another question from Chetan sorry, I probably butchered your name, but in the chat was, are there any benchmark reports or comparisons to see the benefits of upgrading to the latest Node version?
So we used to have a benchmarking working group who was kind of in charge of this. We had a dedicated benchmarking machine. We would run, I know of at least the Acme Air benchmark. I can't remember if there were more or not. But again, it's kind of one of the things where, we're run by volunteers, and if no one's volunteering to do the work, then sometimes even useful work streams get wound down. So I don't know if there's anything like that now, but we do have benchmarks inside of Core for things like that you can run individually. Great
ways to get involved.
Yeah, it's one where, it was, as Colin said, we ran out of volunteers to do that. The benefits to upgrading, we do get performance optimizations through making sure we keep up with the new versions of V8, and I know they continually work on that. So there is going to be a benefit, even if we don't measure them ourselves in terms of Node. The other benefit, of course, you get is the 3-year life cycle is a good length, but not so long that you want to hang on to a particular version forever. So I think that's another reason why you should be considering to move up. But like it's I guess, like, the other thing is, I get the sense that like in terms of Node, it's not necessarily as CPU crunching heavy as like some other workloads where it's like, hey, I got 10%, and so therefore my app runs 10% faster. The async nature and the kind of the way it works means that in a lot of cases, the pure sort of performance angle isn't, I think, as interesting to people, and which is maybe why we don't have enough people saying, hey, we want to make sure we're working on this part to improve it.
Other random questions. Why is it so confusing to have 2 different module systems in the same platform, and advice on how to navigate that? I see Danielle smiling. Oh, you're muted.
I lost my mouse again. The question, why is it so confusing, or why are there 2 module systems? So I think I have answers for both.
You can answer both of them. We don't mind.
Yeah. So I think, like, I kind of see it as two, like why are there two right now? Like the Node ecosystem kind of took off at the same time, like front end web development really got popular. And so using like kind of the import methods, the ESM module system became really popular with front end development. So then, when you have these people that are working on front end and back end, it becomes really confusing because, Node was only supporting CommonJS, and even though the code like looks different, it's also kind of like it also operates differently too. Imports and using the require statements, and so I think like supporting ESM was really important on Node. To kind of make sure there's consistency across, the JavaScript runtimes, and how, anyone that's like jumping into JavaScript, they see, okay, like I can kind of like move these concepts around and not have to like, not have to basically write two different languages, even though I'm using the same language. And so, it's still kind of a process getting like ESM into Node and making sure that people understand that they should be using ESM. And I don't know, I think we'll get there. It's just kind of like a process, as all things are, software takes time to kind of like stabilize. And so I think it is confusing now, but hopefully we'll get to a place where, all the JavaScript kind of looks the same. So.
High hopes, Danielle.
Yeah. I'd add like there's a few things which still I think slow adoption a little bit in terms of, and they're usually on the more non-functional. So like in terms of the being able to debug and being able to instrument for like APM type work, diagnostics, and there are things that I can see in you're running in the browser. They're not as important as they would be in the backend, but since Node is the backend, we want to be able to know what's going on when things go wrong. We need to be able to trace those transactions across levels, and ESM unfortunately prevents, and it makes it harder to do some of those things. And so we're still working through like how do we actually enable that same level of functionality that you get with CommonJS. So that's kind of one aspect which slows it down a little bit, as well as just there's a large installed base, and anytime that you're going to move from one large installed base to something else, it's just going to have to work its way through the system. And I think like the Node add-on API is an example where we introduced that a number of years ago, and you can see over 2, 3, 4 years people have been moving to use it more and more, but it does take time for those things to happen.
I think that another, a few issues with ESM and CommonJS are, one is there's not a great interoperability story between the two. So like you can't just seamlessly move between them. There's going to be issues there. And then, ESM has inside of Node Core has been going on for years. So you have like all of these different releases with varying states of ESM support. I think we are now at a point with Node 12 gone that all of the release lines have had ESM since the beginning. So that certainly helps. And then another problem is unmaintained but popular modules in the ecosystem. So there are, modules that have hundreds of thousands or millions of downloads per week that haven't been updated since 2010. And so, we can't really make people go back and update their CommonJS code to be ESM. So there's a variety of factors at play, in my opinion.
Yeah, agreed. They're going to coexist for as long as forward I can see, to be honest. It's certainly it's quite divisive. Some people say like ESM is the future and everything should move to ESM, but then there's a lot of people in the other camp that say CommonJS is great and it has its use cases. So this kind of dual module system is going to persist for a very long time. Whether that's good or bad depends what side of the fence you're on, I think.
Cool. I was just looking at all the comments in that. So we probably won't be able to get to all the questions in the chat, but again, there is, oh my gosh, I'm going to call it wrong, but a help section. Michael, help me out. The help, is it the help repo that you were talking about, or?
We have a help repo, yes.
Yeah. So
that's a good place to go ask questions, and people help each other, as well as some collaborators are in there helping us.
Yeah. So, I mean, everybody's really good about those different types of things. So definitely check that out. And I will go ahead and post that in the comments so that y'all can head over there. No question is a dumb question. So please feel free to ask. So we're almost on time. I think, Colin, I wanted to just touch on, and everybody else as well, the new Winter community group, WinterCG.
Yeah, so the Winter community group is kind of like a new, I don't want to say standards body. I think it's technically a W3C community group, but it's focused on non-browser JavaScript environments. So there are Cloudflare workers, Dino. There are individuals from Node, although there's not been an official Node project blessing yet, as well as some other companies, Vercel, Shopify, some others. They're really focusing on there's a lot of these new APIs, for example, Fetch. Going back to, I think, even probably ES modules, they are really browser centric when they're being designed by all these committees. And so, historically, there hasn't been a lot of representation from Node and similar projects. And so the idea behind this community group is to kind of, as a group of, server-side JavaScript runtimes, kind of decide on how we think things should be, and make recommendations back to the other standards bodies, or it doesn't even necessarily have to be a standard. We could all just kind of agree that this should be implemented according to X, Y, and Z, for example. And so there's a couple of different work streams going on there now. I think one is, for example, adding streaming crypto to the web crypto spec, and that's being driven by a Node.js TSC member as well. So I think standardization, getting the same APIs, being able to move between runtimes more seamlessly, I think it'll be nothing but good for everyone involved.
It's really cool to hear too that there's so many different folks. I didn't realize there was like so many different parties involved, but you also can go to wintercg.org to check that out. Colin will definitely have to talk about that on the Mod Road podcast at some point in time. I went ahead and posted the link for folks to look at as well. Updates on Foundation. So Michael, I know you are like, I don't know how you keep it all in your head. I don't think anybody does, but do you want to give us some updates on the Foundation?
Sure, yeah. So on the Foundation side, of course, the Collaborator Summit and OpenJS World is in a couple of weeks. So that's sort of the headline I'd lead off with.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing I would say is, like, people have seen over the last year quite a few different sort of supply chain issues, not necessarily in JavaScript, but across the different languages. And so that's quite a focus for the Foundation, and trying to work with projects. And Joe, who's the chair of the Cross Project Council, is planning to spin up a collaboration space to focus on security and best practices, stuff like that. Recently, we also had some projects join us in the data visualization space, and they're spinning up a collaboration space to focus on that, and as a place where people who are working on and interested in that data visualization can get together and work on things together. Otherwise, I think maybe before we started, we mentioned that there were some interesting new projects that continue to join, like Jest. So it's great to see some projects coming in. I think in my mind, there's a number of areas that you need to build JavaScript applications. Like, Colin mentioned before, hey, you always had to pull in a test runner. And, so I think there's like, we need the test functionality. We probably need things like tools to help us with internationalization. We need tools that will help us do logging, and we're going to need something like an Express or Fastify. And in my mind, the more that we can have those like a core set of those projects in the foundation, where we know there's sort of an open and level playing field that's, as part of joining, part of joining the foundation is sort of agreeing to that open and level playing field. Having governance that lets people get involved and influence what goes on and all that. The more that the foundation has a complete set of the components you need to build your key applications, the better that I think it is for companies consuming and using JavaScript, because it's great that we have so much choice in NPM, but it's also a challenge. And Colin mentioned that when he's building things, he likes to pull in as few dependencies as he can. And so every dependency we pull in is a potential. It could be a potential risk. It's a piece of code which we either need to be willing to jump in and fix problems in ourselves, or have somebody who's going to support us in doing that. And the foundation is one place we can sort of, companies can come together to collaborate on providing some support to the projects and sort of reduce their risk.
Yeah, thank you so much. There again, it's just like so much amazing stuff happening in Node, and I'm excited about OpenJS World and all the amazing talks that are going to be there, as well as Collab Summit, which is like one of the most amazing collaboration events that happen. So definitely check those out. I posted a bunch of links also in the comments. Apologies for the first OpenJS link. It went to 2021. Thank you, SEO, but I posted the new one as well. And go ahead, Michael. Sorry.
Yeah, SEO just never helps in terms of finding the newest thing. It's finding the one that has lots of hits already.
Yes, very true. But I did find the new one. And, again, definitely check out, this GitHub repo, the help section. Again, folks, there's a lot of different questions that we weren't able to get to, but the help repo is a great place to get started. So thank you again so much, everyone, for joining. Danielle, Beth, Colin, and Michael. You all are so amazing, and thank you for all the just amazing hard work you all do in your free time. Open sources. It's not for the faint of heart. All right. And thank you, everyone, for attending and joining. And we hope to see you next time on State of Node.